Welcome, everyone. This is Jerry Gautereaux with Contex, and you're all here for our webinar on questions Ask the Scanner Experts. And we have our resident expert, Dan Bennett, in the audience with us today. And we also have Peter Boudreau from the Drafting Clinic Canada, and I think we also might have Rich Gigl from National AZON Equipment. The first question I had from John Mazur in Los Angeles, and they're saying a couple of times I've had a service scan a poster for me, the first time with a Contex scanner, the second time with an HP scanner. Both times the scans came out with streaks, not visible until the digital image is examined under magnification. It seems inherent in the process. So I guess that's what he's asking is this something that they can expect in all the scans, something like that?
Yeah, so probably the best way to answer that is, the scanners at 1200 optical res and the bit depth that we can scan at, we can see everything. So when you're scanning, you really need to do your due diligence and make sure that the glass plate is as clean as possible. And we even recommend, if you're in a facility with, everywhere there's dust, and documents have an inherent ability to build static electricity, which just causes the dust to cling to it. And if those particles get rubbed off during the scan process, or they're on the glass prior to the scan process, they're going to show up as a streak or a line in the image. So the service provider really needs to be careful when they're doing a scan like this, that number one, they make sure the scanner's clean prior to scanning the document. And then number two, that they take a little bit extra time and go evaluate the image before they send it to their customer. Because again, it's not necessarily what I would consider a fault with the scan technology, but it's actually an attribute, because we can see very tiny, even microscopic type grit particles, and they will show up as a streak. And once you understand what they are, they're fairly, that's the biggest step in the process, is understanding what it is that you're looking at. So then you can do the proper cleaning to keep the particles from getting onto the scan glass.
Gotcha. So it almost sounds like you need to clean the scanner, and potentially sometimes if it's very detail oriented, you almost need to clean the original too.
Yeah, the originals are the source typically of all the dirt that gets into the scanner, and these things build charge. You run them through the scanner, they stick to the glass, and then they're going to show up as a line. So there are a few tricks too, just for maybe the people out there that are struggling with this type of thing. Rain-X is a wonderful product. It basically, glass is fairly porous under a microscope, and these little pores are what's capturing these grit particles, these little silica particles, as they travel through the scanner. And the trick with it is keeping them moving through the scanner instead of stopping. And if Rain-X basically coats the glass with just it doesn't show up in the image at all, but just a very fine layer of like a silicone that basically prevents the grit particles from stopping. And that's the whole trick with this. And but I do know some houses that prior to each scan, they'll just flip the lid open, do one nice sweep of a microfiber cloth from right to left to kind of drag anything that got on the glass off. And again, same thing with the document. It probably adds 10 seconds to the whole scan workflow, and then off they go. And but even that, sometimes you'll just happen to capture something that just requires you to rescan the original.
Right.
And
yeah, because I know, like you're saying about cleaning the glass, doing that one kind of wipe from one side to the other is a great way to not reintroduce extra dust. Because when you say, typically, I think people think they kind of put the microfiber cloth down and kind of a wiping back and forth like you would usually clean something. But I think that can actually throw more dust back in. So
Yeah, it just moves it around, right?
yeah, so that single wipe, starting at one end and just wipe it across and pull it off the scanner. I think you're right. It's the best way to get the glass clean in one kind of one little wipe.
Right. So the advantage to glass is it keeps the document nice and flat. It's stable. It gives you extremely good quality scans when you're scanning documents that are folded or maybe buckling or whatnot, where they're a little bit rigid and they don't want to lay flat. If we took and remove the glass, then that buckling is just going to get introduced into the image as well. So we feel that glass is the best solution to solve that. The only downside with it is it can get dirty. So you're going to have to keep your due diligence in maintaining a nice clean environment if possible, and a nice clean glass plate. So
gotcha. And hello, Chris, welcome. And so Linda is asking, how often can you use Rain-X on the glass?
pretty much as often as you like. Fortunately, it doesn't build up any layering at all. Typically, I would recommend, because it's a pretty solid product, once, maybe twice a week is probably all you need to do.
Right, because it leaves a nice residual amount, right?
Right. You just put a little on a cloth, kind of make a nice little swirled, motion across the glass, let it dry. It takes about a minute or so, and you'll see kind of get a little haze on the glass, and then really buff it all off well.
Gotcha.
And
I think that's the key right there, right?
Yeah, and then the last thing you want to do before you close the lid is one nice, slow, even swipe from right to left. Anything that might have got left on the glass should get drug off.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of the thought process you always want to use, even if you're cleaning, say, the top lid of the scanner. Don't just, wipe it around in circles. Do nice right to left to try to drag everything out of the paper path.
Tom is asking, he said he recently acquired a used Contex SD4450. What software is needed to use it on a Windows 10 platform or with current Mac OS, if that is available?
Okay. Unfortunately, the SD4400 has been discontinued for a lot of years, and it's no longer in what we call life cycle. And what that basically means is Contex guarantees to supply spare parts for a period of 5 years past the last date of production. And the last date of production, I don't recall, and that was, it's been out of life cycle, I think, for about 5 or 8 years or better. And unfortunately, when it went out of life cycle, Windows 10 didn't exist. So that means the Windows 10 drivers don't exist for the SD4400 as well. And you're looking at the 30.
Yeah, I was sorry, I had the wrong one up.
So Windows 7 was the last supported OS for that scanner. So because of the age of the scanner, you're going to have to back up to that. And what Jerry's showing you right there is the supported OSs for that. Mac also wasn't a version of operating systems that were supported for it as well. But if you go to the download section, the proper version of Wide System, which is the driver set for the scanner, as well as Nextimage, is available there for download. But again, it's going to be Windows 7 based is the best you're going to get for it.
And then for Mac, that would also be you would need an older Mac, or you would need to run an older Windows partition on that Mac to do that?
Well, yeah. So we never produced a Mac driver for that scanner. However, the workaround for that is if you have a Mac with, say, VMware or running Boot Camp, where you can boot into a Windows partition, as long as you're running Windows 7 in this particular case, then you could load the regular Windows wide system drivers and run the scanner through that Windows partition. So VMware is probably the most elegant solution out there because it allows you to just hot swap hot toggle between Windows and a Mac environment. So.
Gotcha. Let's see. And then we have another question. What is the difference between Nextimage Free and Nextimage Repro and Scan and Archive?
Okay, so the free version was provided for some of our entry-level scanners, like the SD1 Plus. It came with a free version of Nextimage, and it basically allows you to scan and do some basic things, even scan to, say, a cloud server like Dropbox, that type of thing. It does allow you to scan black and white, full color, that type of thing, but a lot of the advanced productivity tools have been removed from the free version. And things like batch scanning and autofile naming, a lot of those higher end features have been removed from the free version. So then we come down to Scan and Archive and Repro. The big difference between the two is the Scan and Archive is specifically for scanning. The Repro version introduces on top of the Scan and Archive version additional features that allow you to copy. So if you have a wide format printer, anything from Canon to Epson to HP, we support just about everything through what we call direct printer drivers. It allows you to color calibrate, create a closed loop color calibration between the printer and the scanner so that your color fidelity is extremely good. And it allows you to basically turn your scanner into a wide format document copier. And but the Repro version is adding on to the Scan and Archive, basically the ability to do copying.
So it's like Scan plus Archive, but then it also includes that copy module.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And both versions have full accounting features for tracking, what you're scanning, what you're copying, how many documents were color, what operator, just all kinds of advanced features that are really tailored for productivity.
And the majority of that stuff is all going to be limited out of the Nextimage Free version. That's
right.
Kind of, as you said, resolution restricted, file format restricted, and maybe I think no multi-page, things like that, right?
Right.
And then we've got a member of the audience raising their hand. Robert may have a question for us. Robert, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent.
I was wondering, there's a little computer on the Quattro that sits on the back of the monitor. Can you hook the Quattro up to another computer?
So it sounds to me like you probably bought that through one of the dealers that potentially National AZON if you're in the US, and they provided an actual PC all-in-one solution. So it came with basically everything. But the short answer is, can you hook that up to any computer? Absolutely. It will function, and the Quattro itself will run with Windows 10, for example, no problem. And you basically just need to install Wide System, Nextimage, and plug the scanner into it, and you're off and running.
And with the IQ Quattro X, I think, and I've got a couple of the pictures up here, that also is sometimes shown with with a tablet sitting on top of the scanner. And so that's, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's showing it in use with the Nextimage remote application. Is that right?
Right. And that's a thing that sometimes people get confused with. Like if you look on the screen right now that Jerry has up, there it is right there. There's a little tablet sitting in the center of the scanner. There's basically just a groove. So here's one iteration, and that's just a touchscreen monitor running, say, Repro, for example. But then we also have this little ability to take any tablet or iPad, and what it does is it remotely interfaces with Nextimage running on a regular computer. And so that the data isn't flowing through the tablet's just basically remote controlling your PC. So the advantage to that in a very, very high productivity environment, just reaching over to get to a touch monitor can start to slow down the process. If you have hundreds of thousands of documents, you want your operators completely focused on just feeding the scanner one sheet after another as fast as they can go. And these new scanners running at the speeds that they run, it's really difficult for even the best operators to stay ahead of the scanner. They're just very, very fast. By the time you get, a big sheet of paper orientated, laying on the scanner's already scanned and is done, and it's just waiting. So the faster you can go, seconds start to count. And this allows the operator to, if he needs to make a quick change to Nextimage, he can do so off of that little tablet sitting directly in front of him, and keeps the focus where it is. So it's all about paper movement and how fast you can keep the paper running through the scanner. So
Gotcha. And so now we all have a question from Chris saying that they have a Contex HD Ultra and that they scan worn and older drawings that get jammed in the scanner. I think what he's asking is there, is some assistance to that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that would come to mind in that type of a scenario. It's most likely the documents, because they are, chafed and wrinkled and maybe torn on the leading edge, and that can cause a lot of issues where it wants to catch as it runs through the scanner. A couple of tricks that have been used a lot in the past. For example, if you have a 24 by 36 inch sheet and it's quite frayed at the leading edge in landscape mode, often all you need to do is say rotate it 90 degrees and run it in portrait. And because now the tears are on the side, it won't hang. It's usually just as the document's first feeding into the scanner, that's where most of the issues come. And another solution that often used, especially with really, really old originals that are quite delicate, we do provide carrier sheets that are available where you can actually insert the document into a carrier sheet. Depending on the size of the document, some will fit in a carrier sheet. I've actually seen people just run a small carrier on the leading edge just to get the first leading edge through, and then the rest of the scan will go through.
Gotcha. And just to follow up on that, Chris is saying some of our drawings have torn and crinkled edges.
Yeah. So that's really a challenge. One thing as well that helps, if it's just crinkled, not so much with the tears, but and I've seen people, even tape the backside where the tear is to keep it nice and sealed, would be to, when you insert the document, grab the right and left side and pull it taut and then insert it. So, you put your two thumbs maybe an inch or so back from the leading edge, pull it nice and tight, which will basically pull all of the wrinkles and the curls out. And that'll usually get it past that first set of feed rollers. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to be good enough because it holds that tautness, because we have a lot of rollers across the width of the scanner. And sometimes, though, you catch just the wrong, say it's the very corner, you'll start to catch an area where maybe there isn't a feed roller on that particular location. Just slide the document over a little bit to the right or to the left. Often that will help as well. But if it's really, really bad, carrier sheets are probably your best go-to tool. But again, I found, just in my experience, the vast majority of the time, just pulling the document tight, right to left as you insert it, will make a big difference. So this is awesome, guys. When we first started doing these webinars, Jerry and I would sit and talk to each other. And we get a few questions maybe in a whole period. One rapid fire question after another is really useful. So thanks everybody for participating.
Sure. And then, really, this is great. And so, and we have a question from Habib asking, is there a video that shows how to replace the top glass on the new scanner?
That's a good question. There is a link that we could provide. We would have to directly send it because it's basically a service tool. We have a restricted area within our website for our servicing partners and our distributors, and there is an area within that that explains that in video form. So this here is basically going to show you, in this particular case, this is an HD Ultra X, how to open the lid, where you get to the edge of the glass. Basically, in this scanner, it just literally lifts right out. And then they request that you clean the glass before putting in the new one, and then just basically refit it. The leading and trailing edges of the glass have a magnet within them, and flexible magnets, and it basically just snaps right back into place. Again, you clean and close the lid and you're off and going again. Often when you do change a glass, on this particular scanner, you can probably get away without recalibrating. But often when you swap glass, there can be just a tiny, tiny difference in height. And we would recommend that you just do at least a new alignment on the calibration tool. So.
Let's see. And then there was a, see, I know we had a question on the high stand for the high stand for the SD1. Does that have a basket?
No, high stands do not have baskets. The reason for that, this is again on the image here on the screen, you're seeing low stands. The high stand is designed to basically sit over the top of a printer, so the basket would be in the way. And that's the reason why we don't have a basket on the Contex high stands. Now, like for example, National AZON, they've created their own stand that is a zero turn, and it's quite a tool for production. And basically has a kind of like a collated stacker. So the documents come out the back and just slide down a ramp, and you stack the originals up above. So everything is basically within arm shot. You're not twisting to grab a document and put it in. And so for those areas that really have a lot of production, it's a tool that is really super valuable. And it looks like Rich just pasted a YouTube of that particular zero turn as well. They've been quite successful with that product. So,
and just a little bit of a follow-up back to Chris's question about the HD Ultra and you know, scanning the torn and kind of wrinkled documents, and it's asking about, could they lift up the plate a bit where we can get the carrier sheets to lay flat and tape edges. It says we were also having issues with only running 5 or 6 at a time.
So
I think you may have already kind of answered it. You know, this came in while you were talking. And so I think you were talking about the different options on the carrier sheet and kind of how to place, you know, the drawing in there, and then also just to get that leading edge. One of the things I wanted to mention also is that there's quite a few, when you don't necessarily have something that's completely, you know, kind of little bits and pieces hanging everywhere, but you don't have that straight leading edge that you can use. What a lot of folks will do is they'll keep a roll of fairly inexpensive, just a nice roll of 36-inch bond by the scanner, and they'll cut a piece that they can feed into the scanner first, and then almost like a carrier, they'll flip that bond page over and insert the original underneath of it, and then start the scan.
Yeah, we've seen all kinds of interesting methods of doing that.
To kind of straighten out that you know, what might be
The
a
leading edge
or a torn edge.
Yeah, and in that type of scenario, the advantage to that is then you're scanning just paper, for example. You're not scanning through. Sometimes the carrier sheets are very translucent, so you don't see a lot, but that film does add a little bit of opaqueness to the original. And you can absolutely clean that up very easily with a higher gamma value or a higher contrast setting, maybe a lower white point setting, to eliminate that, filter it out basically. But the premium sheets that we use, we have a premium document carrier, and it basically comes with either a white or a black background. So it's not film on two sides, it's film on only one side. And so you can insert the document, have a nice white background, and scan the whole thing that way, or a black background if you desire. Another trick that we've seen is actually taping the original on the leading edge to the inside of the carrier sheet. So for example, an area that does that quite often is in the apparel industry, where they're scanning original artwork that has been painted onto silk. The silks are so flexible and so pliable and kind of like airy, lightweight. They'll take that and they'll masking tape the leading edge of that and then stretch it and tape the back so that the silk is nice and flat, and then close a carrier sheet and scan the whole thing. So if you really are dealing with quite wrinkled, maybe they've been stored in a...
There's nothing harder to scan than a piece of silk, right?
Yeah, it's...
As far as through a roller scanner.
And we've got some customers that's all they scan.
Right, yeah.
100%.
And like you said, especially in the garment industry and in some other specialty art industries and things like that.
Yeah.
And then, so Paige had a couple of questions combined into two. Saying we have old maps that are they're black on or white on black or gray depending on how degraded it is, and the contrast between the map and the background is very low. So I think they're asking if there's an adjustment that can be made.
Yeah. So for example, let's say you have a a map that is, say, quite yellowed, and maybe it was an old copy of a blue line or probably a sepia would be a better way to describe it. And the line work that you're trying to scan and retain is literally almost the same gray levels or of the background noise that you're attempting to clean up. So basically what happens, for example, if you use a white point setting and you try to eliminate this off-white background noise, then you start to lose the line work as well, because there's such a close relationship between what's in the background and what's new. Often, maybe for example, you have a coffee stain or something's been spilled on the document sometime 80 years ago, and that leaves a dark stain. You're trying to get rid of that dark, but you're trying not to lose line weight. So there's a couple of tricks depending on the ultimate end results you're looking for. If you can convert the document to black and white and scan it, in 1-bit black and white, the advantage of that is you can use an algorithm that we developed called adaptive thresholding, and it will actually compensate the amount of thresholding that's taking place depending on the document itself. So it's quite a sophisticated algorithm, and it can figure out what's lines and what's dirt. And so that would be one solution to use. However, in archival, often the end customer is looking for something that's as close to the original as possible. So they want to see that noise, basically.
That grit,
that yellow, ugly looking document. They don't want us to clean it up. In those particular cases, some of the tricks is within the black and white point settings, we have something called fine lines and fills. That is a pretty nice filter to retain light line work, but really get aggressive on the background. and try to clean that up. Otherwise, you just need to scan color and take it all.
Gotcha.
You know, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. Often, a lot of archivists, that's what they want.
Even if you're scanning grayscale or black and white, you're scanning it in color. But the nice thing there is that you can do some color reduction from that point, can't you?
You can, and again, you have to be careful, because when you get within just a few shades of gray difference between the background noise and the line work, it gets a little tricky. And so often just a 1 or 2 gray level shift in your white or black point settings or your contrast settings will make a difference. So you want to get very subtle when you start to filter these things. And usually what I do is I pick 2-3 areas on a document that are really, they're going to be the hard ones to deal with, and then adjust for those, and then go back and look. And sometimes you'll have to find a magic, compromise somewhere in between to get all the line work, not lose any data, but then try to produce as clean of original as possible. But if you can convert to black and white, though, that is a really nice way to go, because it does really make it look much, much better than the original, but it just depends on the application.
A couple of things I'm thinking there. If somebody was to do it, say, in color, would there be any advantage to scanning an index color where you can see a color chart and decide which colors you might want to merge or drop out?
Yeah, as long as you don't go too, I would start with index with full 8-bit, which is 256 colors, because that gives you the most data to attempt to not lose any data. Often what happens with index mode, if you cut it down too low, say to 8 colors or something like that, it can get kind of blotchy, because you start, what it'll do is, let's say it's a yellow background that you're trying to clean up. Often there's probably hundreds of different shades of yellow.
And you're merging shadows and all sorts of other things, right?
Yeah, it'll start, leaving strange artifacts in there because you took too many of them out to recreate that well. But at full 8-bit, it does pretty good. But again, it just depends on the original. Usually 256 colors on a map of any kind is plenty of color to be able to get what you're looking for.
And then to back up a little bit to something that you said at the start, where we're saying, if you're just trying to get the black and white, that may be one thing, but if we need to move into grayscale or color, that's where you're going to get some of the detail. But if they were able to simply use or be, get good results from the black and white settings, would there be any advantage to, where they said this was a black background, white line, essentially blueprint? Would there be any advantage to inverting those colors to where they end up with white background, black line work?
Yeah, that's another trick that you can use especially in the black and white world. You can just invert. So you're scanning for blue lines, for example, where the line work is white and everything else is kind of a real dark blue color. Invert, and then you just get a nice white document with nice black lines on it. And then it's very, very simple to adjust the threshold value up or down a little bit to find that nice middle ground. And it's quite significant when you do it. It really does draw it out. The other advantage, the biggest advantage of scanning black and white for black and white originals, of course, is file size. You can scan very tight compression in a black and white file and get really nice small images, where when you go into 24-bit color, even index color at 256 colors, the file sizes can get quite enormous quickly. And it's a shame to be looking at say a 500 megabyte file that's just a black and white original, that if you scanned it at black and white, it would be a couple hundred
kilobytes.
Yep.
So, and then I think as we're probably wrapping up on time, but we've got a question, maybe a last question from William asking, when making an adjustment to a scan doc, after saving to a network folder and sending to print, it's crashing the HP print software, parentheses, smart stream, with error message, resource area is full. This is only if I make an adjustment to the scan, i.e. placement, sizing, color values, etc. Is anyone else having having a similar problem? And then just as a follow-up, they're saying the file size isn't changing, so it's not a file size issue. And then Chris weighed in and saying that they are also having a similar problem.
So I have to think about this a little bit. You're scanning to a network folder.
And sending to print.
So I think my first question would be, are you both wanting to save the image and print the image, or are you just looking to create copies?
In our case, I worked with Chris. My name's Linda. In our case, we're just scanning them and sending them to a folder on a drive. And what happens is we get 5 or 6 of them, and after that, we can't put any more in. The scanner just won't accept any more. If I take the folder, if I go in and move the folder that we have and put the files in another location, I go back to sign in and log in again, I can do another 5. Then I have to do the same thing again. It's like, it's just, I don't know how we can get it to scan more than 5 or 6 drawings without moving everything again, signing back in, scan 5, move it. That seems like not work. It's hard. And
if
maybe
you,
the other gentleman's having the same problem.
if you're doing this to a local folder, is everything seem to be fine? Is it only when you're going across the network?
Going across it to our network drive, right.
Yeah.
And Rich Gigl is mentioning, how about admin rights on the folder?
The admin on the folder, when the gentleman came to set us up, he set us up so that we could scan. We tell it what folder to go to on our drive, and it goes into that folder. Once we get 5 or 6 of them in there, scanner won't accept anymore. Then we go and we move them out of the folder to another location, go back, and it scans again. I don't know if the memory, is it full?
Is it, and are these indeed multi-page documents, or are they individuals?
So
Individual.
William's following up saying, usually a multi-page file to copy and save to the file folder.
Yeah, it sounds to me, and I'm guessing here a little bit, I'm speculating without, having a lot more detail, but it sounds to me that for some reason, when the files are being stored on the network share, the resources are being limited. Because there shouldn't be any reason. We have a lot of customers that scan, say, 100% of all their documents in batch mode directly to a network share. So something's happening in the network environment that is preventing, and I don't know if that's just a bandwidth issue or whatnot. I think that's a question that's going to have to be addressed with someone in an IT environment, because if you're able to scan to the local PC without any issues, but you are having difficulty doing multiple scans across the network, then that sounds like a bandwidth issue. And again, the scanner is going to get quite ahead often of the
So we should talk to our IT people about why it won't accept any. I'm just thinking it's size of it gets to a certain size and it says we can't accept any more in this folder, and then that's when we have to do the move.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it sounds like. It seems a little peculiar and odd, for standard practice. And I know some people are kind of chiming in here,
Yeah.
maybe with even a lot more networking experience than I've got. But
Well, and Williams is saying that he suspected a bandwidth or just an HP handshake issue. But then Rich Gigl from National AZON is definitely saying that they would like to assist in doing a deep dive on this. And so if you could email them the issue at info@azon.com, that's AZON.com, then that's something that they can kind of get a support case started with and try and work on this with you.
And Jerry, just before we drop off, there was one other question, and we've gotten it a couple of times recently. So I want to hit that one, and then maybe we can wrap up. But the question,
there's a lot of restrictions to our network, so that could be the possibility on that.
But that might be something easy enough to sort through, though.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
You're very welcome. So there's been a question about how do you, on an SD1MF, how do you, or this also is applicable to the IQ Flex, how do you eliminate buttons on the operator panel?
Gotcha. Like dropping out the iCloud or something like that?
Right. And so that feature was introduced in one of the later versions. It actually goes back a couple of versions in firmware. So you would first need to update the firmware to the latest and greatest on the scanner. And then once that happens, you basically just select your setup, scanner, buttons. Those are the three. So you go into the scanner settings, you go to the options and the buttons, and you can literally pick and choose. You'll get a whole pick list with the check mark, and anything with the check mark is going to be visible. If you uncheck the box, then that particular feature will disappear on the touch screen. It is actually introduced into the SD1MF user's guide. It's been there, but I did look because we were questioned about that. Where are this? Where's the dialogue or the setting, the instructions on how to do this? And I found it in the SD1MF, but I haven't found it in the IQ Flex. So we're getting that manual updated. I think it is actually been updated, but it just hasn't been uploaded to our website.
So the feature is in either the SD1MF or IQ Flex with the latest firmware installed. That's a button adjustment setting that they can choose, and it's in the manual for the SD1MF and should be updated in IQ Flex soon.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just a simple setting that you do on the operator, on the scanner itself.
Gotcha. Sounds good. And thank you all very much for your time. And again, this is Jerry Gautereaux with Contex, hosting with Dan Bennett, as well as our partners from the Drafting Clinic Canada, as well as National AZON Equipment. Thank you all very much for coming.